When a college student went down the wrong path, he gave up on his dreams and instead focused on dating around, smoking, and partying. After deciding to work at a disabled folks' home, he gradually came to go insane, developing an overwhelming malice for the elderly and disabled. Right now, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. This is because lately I've been trying to find someone who can remove all of my data from marketing databases that I've never consented to be on. It's very hard to find a solid, definitive list of all of the companies that take this data and spread it all over the internet. There have been numerous data breaches from different platforms over the years that have been slowly leaking out and only adding to the problem. Requesting to be removed off of all of these could take you years to do manually. That's where Incogni comes in. You can just make an account on Incogni and they will send a data protection law compliance request to all of these different companies and demand that they remove all of your data from these different companies' databases. In-app, you'll get a dashboard that will show you the day-by-day progress in getting your data out of the hands of these different companies. They'll even deal with any objections from their side. Not only do companies get your information so that they can market off of you, they also get as much data as they can to build a customer profile of you and sell it to other companies as well who will use it however they please. They can get your names, aliases, social security number, usernames and passwords, and even your physical home address and specific online activity. It's pretty easy to see how things could go bad very quickly. These companies have even taken out massive loans in people's names without them even knowing, ruining their credit and really racking up the debt. Cybercriminals from an underground platform called SSN-DOB were even taking people's social security numbers and other personal info from large data brokers like Dun & Bradstreet in order to steal their identities. It's pretty crazy what they can get their hands on. Incogni's easy. Just make an account, give them the right to work on your behalf, and let them get to work. So take back your personal data with Incogni. Just use my code DIRETRIP down in the description below to get 60% off of your annual plan. Incogni is available risk-free for 30 days, so there's no harm in just trying it out. Japan is a country that's discrimination against the disabled is fairly unknown to the West, although it has been getting better in recent years, especially with the younger generation. It used to be that having a disabled family member was something to be ashamed of. They were the kind of person that you kind of hid away from the world and took the duty of taking care of in private so that you wouldn't burden the rest of society with taking care of them. This attitude has, over the years, fostered not only indifference but contempt within some individuals. Satoshi Uematsu was born on January 20th, 1990. His father was an elementary school teacher while his mother was a homemaker. All throughout his childhood, Satoshi wanted to be a teacher just like his dad and focused on that during school. Even into young adulthood, he continued to live with his parents and pursue his career. In spring of 2008, when he was about 18 years old, Satoshi entered into the Department of Education at Teikyo University, studying education in order to achieve his dream. During his first year, he never skipped classes, earned extra credits, and even worked part-time at an after-school center, hoping that it would help him get an even better teaching position down the line. However, Satoshi really started to fall off during his second year of university. This was when he started meeting a lot of women on dating sites, going out to clubs, and getting into smoking a whole lot of weed. One of his friends said that he smoked so much that he couldn't really feel the effects anymore, being unable to tell if he was even high or not. When his friends told him to cut back, he very naively responded with, "Nothing from nature can be that bad." Satoshi decided to go out and get an extra large tattoo across his entire back during his third year of school. In Japan, tattoos have much more of a negative connotation, usually being associated with gang activity. When Satoshi sent a picture of this tattoo to a girl he was dating at the time, she freaked out. She called him and said, "Aren't you trying to become a teacher? Are you an idiot?" To which Satoshi responded with, "I'll just do it so that nobody finds out about it." The tattoo wasn't entirely unrelated as, according to a psychiatrist who has seen him, Satoshi had actually been doing some unspecified work with the tattoo artist and had come to make some connections in the world of organized crime. Despite all of this, Satoshi was still able to get in some student teaching practice within his fourth year of school, from May to June. He got an A ranking for both his work and his attitude, with it having been said that he was very good at working with children. He easily got his hands on a license to teach at an elementary school, but oddly enough, he never went on to apply for a job as a teacher. He later said, "I wasn't putting my all into my studies. I thought I needed to take responsibility if I was going to be involved with children's precious time." He then gave up on his dreams of becoming a teacher. After he graduated, he went on to work at a transportation company, replacing vending machines which didn't even require a degree. He quit that job after about 6 months, disliking that it was an overnight job and that it was pretty physically exhausting. He went out drinking with a friend who was working at a disabled care center called Tsukui Tamayuri-en. After hearing that the job was pretty fun and rewarding, Satoshi decided to give it a try and started working there in December of 2012. Tsukui Yamayuri-en was a residential care center for the disabled run by a social welfare organization. It was established by the Japanese government and built on a 7-acre plot near the bank of the Sagami River. The center housed about 149 residents, with ages ranging from as young as 19 years old to as high as 75. Most of the people there had a mental/learning disability, but a lot of them also had physical disabilities as well. Some of them were capable of engaging in activities, but some of them were also completely bedridden. When Satoshi started working there, he did complain initially that the yearly salary of 3 million yen, about $21,000, was too low, but he said that the residents there were both cute and fun to work with. However, this attitude would gradually, radically come to change. On February 13th of 2016, 3 years later, Satoshi posted to Twitter, writing, "I don't know if it's right, but I should act." Nobody was really sure what this vague tweet was even referencing. Then, on the 19th, he again posted that he had been given voluntary retirement and that he might be arrested soon. That day, Satoshi told a nurse working in the center that, quote, "It's best to restrain the residents by force and inflict fear on them," when advising her on how to take control. This led to an argument between him and his supervisors. After having worked there for 3 years, Satoshi resigned from his position. Satoshi's neighbors have said that initially he was a happy, lively, friendly, outgoing young man, but during his time working at the facility, his attitude gradually came to change. While he was once a bright young man with a passion for teaching, he had now become an angry, jaded man with a deep-seated hatred within him, a hatred toward the disabled. Shortly after resigning from his position, Satoshi decided to sit down and write a letter to deliver to the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Japan. He wrote a long, rambling, angry letter about his opinions about the disabled and his ideas for how the country should be run. He made an attempt to hand-deliver the letter to the Speaker's house, but was turned away by security. So he returned the following day and handed the letter off to the security guards, asking them to deliver it on his behalf. They did, and let's just say the speaker was a bit shocked at what he read. The full letter reads as follows. Dear Lower House Speaker Tadamori Oshima, thank you very much for reading this letter. I can wipe out a total of 470 disabled individuals. I am fully aware that my remark is eccentric. However, thinking about the tired faces of guardians, the dull eyes of caregivers working at the facility, I am not able to contain myself, and so I decided to take action today for the sake of Japan and the world. My reasoning is that I may be able to revitalize the world economy, and I thought it may be possible to prevent World War III. I envision a world where a person with multiple disabilities can be euthanized, with an agreement from the guardians, when it is difficult for the person to carry out household and social activities. I believe there is still no answer about the way of life for individuals with multiple disabilities. The disabled can only create misery. I think now is the time to carry out a revolution and to make the inevitable but tough decision for the sake of all mankind. Let Japan take the first big step. Would Mr. Tadamori Oshima, who bears the world, use his power to make the world proceed in a better direction? I sincerely hope you would deliver this message to Shinzo Abe. This is the answer I reached after serious thinking about what I can do for humankind. Dear Lower House Speaker Tadamori Oshima, would you lend your power for the sake of dear Japan and all humankind? Please give this full consideration. Satoshi Uematsu. The plot. It will be carried out during the night shift when staffing is low. The target will be 2 facilities where many multiply disabled people reside. Staff on guard will be strapped with cables so they can't move and can't make contact with anyone outside. The act will be carried out speedily and definitely without harming the staff. After wiping out the 260 people in 2 facilities, I will turn myself in. In carrying out the act, I have several requests. After my arrest, my incarceration should be up to 2 years, and please let me lead a free life afterward. Innocence on grounds of insanity. A new name, Takashi Iguro, government registration and documents such as a driver's license needed for everyday life. A disguise for regular society through plastic surgery. Financial aid of 500 million yen. I would like these conditions to be promised. If you can make your decision, I will carry it out at any time. Please consider this fully for the sake of Japan and world peace. I hope with all my heart that this can be discussed with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, although I am sorry to trouble him in an unimaginably busy schedule. Satoshi Uematsu. The police were informed of the matter shortly after and went to pay a visit to good old Satoshi. He said that he only wanted to save people from unhappiness, both the severely disabled and the people that were burdened with taking care of them. They determined that he definitely posed a danger to others, contacting the municipal government. They asked them for the authority to forcibly hospitalize him under the Mental Health Act. This was granted and he was thrown into a hospital that very day. 2 different physicians there diagnosed him as having both cannabis psychosis and a paranoia disorder. He was all set to remain in the hospital for quite some time. Once some urine samples came back positive for marijuana, the physicians decided that Satoshi's care was their highest priority and didn't report anything to the police. After about 2 weeks in the hospital, the doctors came to the decision that Satoshi no longer posed any threat to others, and the local government allowed him to be discharged. After Satoshi was released and went home, the police came out to pay him a visit only to find that he wasn't there. They got in contact with his parents, who told them that he had gone back to the family home to live. The police asked him to keep an eye on his behavior and report anything strange. The police then suggested to Satoshi's former workplace that they better up the security on the premises just in case. They did so, adding a good number of security cameras all around the facility shortly after. Satoshi then chilled out with a girlfriend. Being that it was 2016, Donald Trump and the news about the US elections had been all over the place. He told his girlfriend, "Trump will become president. When someone with a high social status speaks out, the people will move." Satoshi then, in admiration, dyed his own hair blonde to give himself that signature Donald look. While he didn't really care about Trump's political stances at all, he admired how he was able to speak out and get the public riled up and motivated. He told one of his friends, "If I kill a disabled person, Trump will press the like button. If I kill someone before the US presidential election, the laws will change. I would be a hero." This friend responded, telling him, "No matter what you do, the laws of the world won't change. You need to know what is right and what is wrong." But no matter what this friend said, he wouldn't change his mind. A few days later, Satoshi did call his friend to apologize, but his friend felt that the apology was hollow, mainly only made to get him to shut up. January 26, 2016. After planning and seething for months, Satoshi finally snapped. He knew that it was now time to make his move. Security camera footage showed Satoshi pulling up to his previous workplace, the disabled facility, in his car. He parked, walked around to the back of the car, and opened the trunk. He then proceeded to pull out some items from the trunk and walk towards the building. While usually over 200 people worked at the facility, only about 9 were on the premises that night, with only 1 being a security guard. They weren't at all prepared for what was about to happen. At 2:10 a.m., Satoshi walked up to a glass window on the first floor of the building and used a hammer to break in. He ambushed 2 staff members in the office, tying them up with electrical cords before taking their keys. He then informed the staff that he knew he was risking his life and that he would likely face the death penalty, but he was ready for what he was about to do. He moved to a room outside of the office and pulled out a knife. He stabbed 5 residents in their rooms before proceeding down the hallway. There, he entered a large room and stabbed 5 more. Leaving that room, he then proceeded down the long hallway for quite a while before stopping at yet another room and stabbing 2 more people in their beds. He then left that room and walked toward the stairs. He stepped out on the 2nd floor, immediately turning into another room and stabbing 3 residents in there. He then left that room and entered another, stabbing another 4 people as they slept. It was then that he felt satisfied with the level of carnage and finally left through an entrance on the 2nd floor. By now, the police had been called, only being told that a man dressed in all black had broken into the building with a knife. At 2:50 a.m., after 40 minutes of mayhem, Satoshi ran back out to his car, carrying a bag of items on hand. He then pulled out of the parking lot and sped away, being long gone before the police even arrived. Shortly after, Satoshi once again posted on Twitter. This time it was something even more strange than before. He posted, "So that the world can be at peace. Beautiful Japan," and closed the app. Armed police officers finally made their way into the building at 3 a.m., coming across the grisly, bloody crime scene that spanned the entire facility. Neighbors who lived nearby were shocked to see all the commotion in what was normally a quiet, peaceful area. They were told to stay inside as someone armed and dangerous may be nearby. Then they saw ambulances begin to arrive and haul off body after body after body. In total, about 29 ambulances were required for the job. All of the wounded were taken to 6 different hospitals around western Tokyo. Many people were dead. Of the 26 who were left with injuries, 13 of them were very severe. The others were suffering from more minor injuries. The father of one of the disabled tried to make his way out to the hospital, frustrated that the police, the ambulances, the hospital, none of them would tell him what was going on. He came to find other relatives waiting there as well, all in the exact same situation. They had to hear about what had happened from the TV rather than from the staff. Satoshi was then left to think about what he was going to do next. He went to a convenience store and bought some cigarettes, an eclair, and a Coke to drink. He then hopped back into his car and chowed down before deciding to drive out to the police station. He planned to turn himself in, just like his letter said. Although he wasn't finished eating, he tossed the remaining half of his eclair out the window, feeling that being arrested while eating one would be pretty embarrassing. Satoshi then arrived at the police station, carrying a bag full of knives and blood-stained tools to turn himself in, saying, "I am the culprit of the incident that just happened at Yamayuri Inn. I did it for the sake of world peace. It would be best if the disabled disappear." He was then thrown into cuffs. Satoshi was taken into an interrogation room and immediately questioned. Satoshi felt his tension release as he finally sat down, now that his deed was done and he no longer had to rush around. While one cop was interrogating him, he got a message over the radio from a baffled colleague saying, "The injured are, right now, and just kind of trailing off. Satoshi, uncaring, noticed that he had torn some skin on his right hand during the stabbings. He asked the officer, "Could I have a band-aid?" to which he was ignored. He was surprised to see that he was being treated like a criminal. He had really hoped that the public would be happy about what he did and maybe even admire him. Satoshi was thrown into a police car and taken to an area where a bunch of ambulances, police officers, and concerned residents were all crowded around. He was photographed near the window that he had broken into and then was taken back to the police car. By now, news crews were all over the place, broadcasting images of the ongoing investigation, tarps going up, and bodies being carted away. Some news reporters began to shout that a blonde man with black clothes had been arrested, turning all attention to the police car where a man had a blue jacket draped over his head. He was then filmed being thrown into the vehicle with the blue jacket being taken off. Satoshi turned around and gave a devious grin to the camera crews, camera flashes intensifying as he became fully satisfied with what he had done. Police and prosecutors were, at the time, unwilling to divulge any details to the public. All they could say was that he had been sent in for more questioning. A spokesman said, "We are still confirming details of the case. Police have yet to formally establish a motive for the attack. However, Uematsu was put in the hospital earlier this year for almost 2 weeks after he said he would kill disabled people." Satoshi had killed 10 women and 9 men aged between the ages of 19 and 70 and injured 26 more. It was the country's worst mass killing in many decades. Once it came to be known that so many of the victims were dead, all of Satoshi's charges were switched from attempted murder to full-on murder. He was sent to the prosecutor's office while the police raided his home. During further questioning, Satoshi did offer up an apology to an extent. He didn't apologize to the victims in the case. Rather, he said sorry to their family members for inconveniencing them. He said, "I apologize to the families for forcing a sudden farewell on them." Rumors began to swirl all around that this was actually an ISIS attack. People struggled to come to terms with the fact that one single man had done all of this. The Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary, Yoshihide Suga, had to come out and confirm that this wasn't a terror attack in any way by any sort of organization. He also promised to analyze the attack so that nothing like this would ever happen again. He said that it was all a very heart-wrenching and shocking incident in which many innocent people became victims. The Prime Minister at the time, Shinzo Abe, later stated during a large gathering in Tokyo, "The lives of many innocent people were taken away and I am greatly shocked. We will make every effort to discover the facts and prevent a reoccurrence." Satoshi's elderly neighbor, a 73-year-old man, said that he was a polite young man that always greeted him with a smile. This all had come as a shock to him. He said, "It would be easier to understand if there had been a warning, but there were no signs. We didn't know the darkness of his heart." The governor of the prefecture, Yuji Kuroiwa, also came out to say, "You could say that there were warning signs, but it's difficult to say if this could have been prevented. This was not an impulsive crime. He went in the dark of the night, opened one door at a time, and stabbed sleeping people one by one. I just can't believe the cruelty of this crime. We need to prevent this from ever happening again." While there was very little information actually leaking out about the attacks, the Japanese media did come to claim that the attack was a hate crime against the disabled. However, the public was still very much left in the dark about the case until a few reporters started coming forward. One news publication in particular called the whole case appalling, especially the decision to let Satoshi out of the mental facility. Satoshi was able to be briefly interviewed by a few news outlets, making it very clear that he hadn't changed his outlook at all. He made statements such as, "The disabled have no point in living," and that he had to do it for the sake of society. Tsukui Yamayuri-en, unable to continue operating in the same state, was fully demolished. Some smaller surrounding buildings off from the main building were left to stand. The governor promised that the whole facility would be rebuilt. After a long back and forth, Satoshi was finally found mentally competent to stand trial in February of 2017. Only a few days later, he was formally charged with 19 counts of murder, 24 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of illegal confinement causing injury, 3 counts of illegal confinement, 1 of unlawful entry, and 1 more of violating the firearm and sword possession control law. While Satoshi's team decided that they would continue to argue that he was mentally incompetent during the time of the attack due to the influence of marijuana, Satoshi himself actually said that he would admit to the crime during his trial. He said that all of that would just be making the case too complicated. However, on January 8th of 2020, Satoshi still went on to plead not guilty to the charges against him. During that hearing, he bit into his pinky finger and had to be restrained by guards. He was taken back to the detention center where, surprisingly, he bit off his pinky finger. According to news outlets, at least a piece of it. He said, "I have no intention of being forgiven. I can't help being resentful." Those who came to speak with Satoshi said that his mind was an odd mixture of both lucid sanity and depraved insanity. During further questioning around the trial, Satoshi came to ramble on about what he thought were the 7 things required to make a person happy. These things were the environment, sex, beauty, marijuana, the military, casinos, and euthanasia. Further going into the topic of the military, he said that Japan should have mandatory military service like South Korea does. When asked why, he responded with, "Because Korean actors are so cool and motivated. I think the reason there are so many hikikomori, or shut-ins, in Japan is because they are unable to overcome severe challenges." He then continued to ramble, saying that beauty produces goodness and that the government should begin to cover at least part of the cost of plastic surgery. He then said that he had been thinking about playing a card game from the US called Illuminati cards. When he looked up those cards on Google, he said that they depict the truth about society. He said that, in the near future, Japan will be destroyed by an earthquake under Tokyo and that an atomic bomb will be dropped on Yokohama. Prosecutors argued that, although Satoshi was mentally competent, the whole crime was inhumane and left no room for any semblance of leniency. The mother of a 19-year-old woman killed in the attack said that she expected and hoped for the death penalty, adding that she was still miserable. It wasn't too long after that the prosecution officially announced that they would be seeking the death penalty in this case after he withdrew his appeal. Satoshi himself told his lawyers that it was wrong to appeal and continue the trial at higher courts. It seemed that he had finally accepted his fate. He said that, while he expected the death penalty, he wasn't all too convinced that he deserved it, though. The brother of one of the victims of the crime asked Satoshi in court during a victim participation program, "If you were unhappy, why didn't you just quit Yamayuri-en?" To which he responded, "I realized it would be better if they weren't there." On March 16, 2020, Satoshi was finally sentenced to death by the Yokohama District Court, saying that he would not challenge the sentencing. On the 30th, the decision was finalized. The families of the victims were actually left feeling very conflicted. While they had hoped that they would see some sort of apology, it was very clear that that was not going to happen. Some wanted to hear that there was at least some sense of regret, but there wasn't. They felt that they were left with no better understanding of the attack than they were before the whole thing even started. The attack and the trial really put the discrimination against the disabled in Japan in the spotlight. A lot of people still view disabilities with shame. While you will probably be fine if you're able to function well enough in society, people still have a negative opinion of heavier disabilities. A lot of the names of the victims still aren't known, as many family members don't want the association with the case. Some of them were unwilling to admit that they had a disabled family member in the first place. Shinichiro Kumagaya, an associate professor at the University of Tokyo who specializes in studying the relationship between people with disabilities and society, spoke out about the case. He said that discrimination against such people was still very strong in Japan, saying that the idea that the disabled should be cared for by their family and not by society was still widely held. He said that a society so unaccepting of caring for their own was likely what led to Satoshi's hatred in the first place. He said, "It's a problem that we live in a society where most people feel no sense of responsibility to support people with disabilities. It's up to each of us to create a different kind of society." The new Tsuki Yamayuri-en buildings were opened in July of 2021. Many families joined the residents and the staff of the facility to offer prayers to Satoshi's victims. A memorial ceremony was held as about 60 new residents moved into the new buildings. People laid flowers at a monument constructed in honor of the victims, with, sadly, only 10 of the victims' names engraved. Only 10 of the victims were approved to be honored by their families. While this story may seem to be over, it actually isn't. After all, Satoshi isn't dead. He's still alive and well on death row, and as long as he's alive, he is able to make some contact with the outside world. There are still a lot of reporters out there who want to delve a little deeper into his mind and find out his thought process, his motivations, and hopefully whether or not he's changed as a person. In April of 2022, 2 years after the death sentence was finalized, Satoshi did end up applying for a retrial in his case. This led to the spotlight being placed on him once again. Some reporters were allowed to correspond with him, finding out that Satoshi had become somewhat of a writer and actually a pretty talented manga artist while in prison. Despite the limited tools available to him in lockup, he's found some pretty creative ways to make some art pieces, even going as far as using toothpaste as white paint. Some of his drawings have actually impressed people, such as a drawing of a carp, one that was included with his original letter to the Speaker of the House as well, actually, and a drawing of what he calls a heartless person. He has written some memoirs in jail where he rambles on about his thoughts on marijuana and the death penalty. The majority of these have never leaked and have only been described in news publications. Disappointingly, the memoirs barely touch on his current situation or his mental health treatment, but he does go on and on about some other topics. He writes that he and other fellow death row inmates are sometimes given permission to watch movies on DVD. He usually gets to watch about 4 a month, and from those 4, he has come to decide on which ones he considers to be absolute masterpieces. These movies consist of The Great Gatsby, Tiger, Scarface, and, The Hangover and Ted. As for his opinions on the death penalty, he writes, 70% of the world has abolished the death penalty. The fact that it is costly is not an excuse. Satoshi also sent some smaller booklets along with his notes to reporters. There he included a good number of manga pages and drawings. While it has been said that the manga is actually fairly long, very few pages of it have actually leaked out to the public. It seems that, rather than describe his desire to carry out the massacre, he has chosen to explain his thought process in the form of a narrative. I've translated and included the available pages here to go over. The manga starts with what is most likely the cover and title of the work, one that he calls The World is Beautiful. On this first leaked page, we get some clear insight as to how Satoshi feels about the elderly. While some protesters march, protesting against their taxes being wasted, a couple of old people begin talking to a few children. An old woman gives a New Year's gift to the kids, but in exchange she says that they need to take care of her until she dies. An old man also states that he's going to keep getting his pension as long as he can. It's clear that Satoshi feels that anyone in society who isn't actively working a job that he feels is productive is not only useless, but completely evil and parasitic, even the elderly who have already worked for their entire lives. The second page is a little harder to understand without its context. We see a few traditional masculine Japanese figures at the top, noted to have tattoos, smoke weed, and carry swords. They seem to have angered this Middle Ages-looking European noble below them. After that, we see an idol otaku, noted to be a virgin, promising to devote his life to idols. Next to him is a part that was actually already written in English, seemingly a foreigner saying, "What, having fun yet? Cool Japan." It seems that Satoshi feels like the traditional Japanese identity was taken over by the West, and this led to an obsession with female singers and stuff. The third page is more focused on attitudes towards religion and is debatably even harder to understand without context. A somewhat Christian-looking priest says that his job is praying to God every morning, something Satoshi seems to think is a waste on society. The Buddhist monk-looking figure on the left isn't treated any better, speaking of the gender disparity between what male and female monks can do. Below, he debates on what the difference between happy and unhappy people really is. He seems to think that, if everyone abandoned their religions and shared the same values, i.e. his values, that true happiness would be found. Then, on the bottom of the page, a character who seems to be mulling around the idea of religion struggles to find what could bring him happiness. On this final page, we see what looks like an angel of death figure striking down a creature similar to the previous heartless creature that Satoshi had drawn. Given the change in tone and art style, it seems that this page might actually be from a different manga than the pages before. The angel goes on a long rant about the folly of man, saying that humans are greedy liars who only seek leisure while bringing misfortune upon others. While Satoshi is mainly writing this to lecture other people, maybe deep down he wanted to tell this all to himself, especially this part. They will never gain goodness. They only work for benefit. They're just monsters. In April of 2023, Satoshi Uematsu's request for a retrial was formally denied. He is to remain on death row. It's unknown when he will finally be executed, but death sentences typically take very, very long to carry out. In Japan, some of them take 20 years or more before they ever actually happen. As of now, there is no set date. We and Satoshi will just have to wait for the inevitable to happen. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Just recently, I've started up a podcast with 4 of my friends called the NBR Podcast. If you find this channel interesting, you might like that one too. I've also opened up a merch store. There you can get yourself some cool Dire Trip t-shirts. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media. If anything were to ever happen to the channel, that would probably be the only way you'd ever hear about it. I also really appreciate when people follow me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are back up too, and you get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.